Hi, Gidon Ariel here in Root Source and Root Source Tours. I believe that's what we're calling this series of videos. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about
in whatever little ways I can.
the experience that we're trying to see here. What we see here is the central study hall. As opposed to most colleges and universities, which one would usually compare a school of higher learning to. And you tell me if this is wrong. Most schools like that are schools where you come to a class, you listen to a professor talking,
Yep.
and then you try to cram in as much understanding as you can, whenever you can, between partying.
Yep.
What we have here in the yeshiva is, as you can see, Bob, close to about 200 young men between the ages of 18 and I would say certainly for the main group here, since it's a Hesder yeshiva, between 18 and 25 or so. It's usually a 6-year program. Plus probably a nice sized amount of people who are older than that. First of all, you've got here much older gentlemen who are the teachers. And you've also got a whole bunch of people who are still studying, but also from time to time give classes. And the model here is you get up in the morning, you come to the morning prayer session, which usually starts at about 7 o'clock in the morning. But I'm sure that a good few dozen students come here at 6 o'clock in the morning to have a pre-prayer study session. That will be followed at about 8 o'clock when prayer is over by another study session, a short study session of about a half an hour, usually studying Musar or ethics, followed by a quick breakfast in the cafeteria. All meals are included in the tuition. And then you have probably from about 8:30 till probably about noon. So that's about 4.5 hours of a straight study session with your study partner. So you look around this room, most of the time you will see two young men sitting next to each other. Sometimes more and sometimes less, animatedly talking about a text. Take a look at this young man with the white jacket and the red and blue shirt clad young gentleman next to him. Mm-hmm. They're talking about a text. Take a look down there. As soon as this gentleman passes, right at the edge, you've got two young men, one in the dark blue sweater and the next one with a dark red crimson shirt. Mm-hmm. They're looking over a text. Look over there, you've got one gentleman standing up animatedly discussing with somebody else the text. All of the people in this room are poring over and discussing the same text. I can't see from here which text it is, but chances are it is from a volume of the Babylonian Talmud or one or a few of the commentaries on that volume. And not only is that volume of the Babylonian Talmud studied and taught in this yeshiva and in all yeshivas, depending on which one they choose. But there's another, that is the one that is studied in the morning. It is followed by a lesson in depth with many of those commentaries studied, trying to understand the depth of that text for about an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours is the length of that lesson. Then they have lunch and a break for about an hour. Then they do the afternoon prayer at about 3. And now it's 4 o'clock right now, and they are studying from about 3:30. Maybe they have a short lesson, or some people choose to have a short lesson in Bible or one of the books of the prophets or something like that. And then they study again probably till about 7 o'clock at night. And then they have dinner. And then they come back from about 7:30 at night, evening prayer, till about 10:30 at night, studying a different volume of the Talmud. So we're talking about people studying from 7 in the morning on the average. I said till 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night is really the earliest that somebody will retire. Some of the students will then continue to study till 11 and 11:30 and 12 and 1 o'clock at night, and wake up again the next morning at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning for morning prayers. And this cycle, I believe the right word I'm thinking of is this discipline, day in and day out, studying God's divine texts, as well as the texts of those people who were inspired by Him to write their texts for thousands of years. Just take a look at just a little bit of the library that we have over here. This is the Talmud that we discussed before. These are books of the Mishnah, the nucleus of the Talmud. Those over there are more books of the Talmud. There are some treatises, commentaries on the Talmud. This is not even the library, Bob. This is the books that we want to have right so that we can grab them. The library is in another nearby cavernous hall. So this is what we have over here. People studying the Bible. I see somebody over there with his computer. Someone else with his earphones in, probably listening to another class.
Gidon, I hear some English being spoken, but the study is in Hebrew?
Well, the reason that you hear English being spoken is because this specific yeshiva is one of the more popular yeshivot of Americans coming to Israel to study for a year. They're post-high school gap year, and some of them end up staying their whole lives. But I would venture to guess that about 75% of the people in this study hall are non-Americans, people who either possibly their parents were born in America, but they themselves were born in Israel. And virtually all of the students here, except for some portion of those American gap year students, have or will have served in the Israeli army.
Before this or after this?
In between this. The Hester program, which means the arrangement that they have with the army, is that they come and study for a half a year or a year or two, according to the plan. Then they go into the army for about a year, maybe a year and a half. Then they come back and study for about another year, and then they go back into the army for another half year or a year or something like that. So altogether, it's a 5 or 6 year program of full-time study, within which there's about a year and a half or two of army service, as opposed to the regular army service, which is 2.5 years or 2 years, 8 months or something like that. Not to mention the extremely high portion of students here who are officers in the army, and they naturally serve more than those 2 years. And let's move a bit to the side. It looks like people are starting to notice this here. But I especially wanted to point out the Holy Ark. There are some yeshivot that have a much more ornate Holy Ark. This yeshiva decided to focus more on the study hall itself, but the verses that are embroidered on the embroidery covering the Holy Ark says, I have placed God before me always, for to my right I will not fall. In other words, if I keep God in front of me always, I will certainly not fall. This also is a verse from Psalms 119, close to verse 140 or 45, I would guess, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so we actually got a pretty good view of this. Managed to squeeze in here one of the locked doors when a student walked in with his key. And for the next few minutes, Bob, I'll be happy to entertain a question that you have, and we'll be able to see what goes on next.
You believe that there's a higher percentage of of Jews studying Torah now than in history, do you think?
I can't quote you, as they say, chapter and verse, but I have seen many times this statistic, and it just seems so natural to me that when you have the state of Israel, that because of various political agreements, has an entire ministry devoted to the expansion and development and support of Torah study, and various other reasons, like, for example, people who come and spend a year in Israel and study and then go back after a few years, develop a business and become wealthy, then they will naturally give more money to the yeshiva, and that will enable the yeshiva to accept more students. And for various other reasons, just off the top of my head, we will see that this yeshiva and so many like it will become bigger and stronger as things come. Just from Hesder yeshivas like this one that combine army and yeshiva study. I was in a yeshiva like this 35 years ago. There were about a dozen yeshivas like that in my day. Today there are over 50, all over Israel. And today there are also pre-army, they call them pre-military yeshiva academies, that there was no such thing in my day, but today there are over 100 of these where students come for a year or two before they go into the army in order to make sure that they do the most effective and substantial service. And there are other kinds of yeshiva also with all kinds of different focuses. And this is only the national religious yeshivas, not to mention the ultra-Orthodox yeshivas, less Zionist as it were, yeshivas, less modern Orthodox, of which there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So it's impossible to compare the quantity and quality of the Torah study that was going on in all generations to that same Torah that is being studied today in Israel. I believe it is a realization of the prophecy on that day. There will be no destruction in my holy mountain, because there will be a thirst and a fulfillment of knowledge of God like the waters cover the seas.